Oh, wait, we're waiting for the recording. There we go. What's up? I'm Dex. This is the AI That Works show where we teach you real hands-on advanced AI coding, AI implementation, AI pipeline, AI engineering, context engineering, real-world solutions to building really good AI apps. Hi, Bob. What do I have to add there?
I think that's it. I think today is going to be an episode that will be, I think, hopefully educational to a lot of people, which is more about streaming and how streaming can make your app a lot more feel almost like a whole different application with and without it. And I think it's 1 second. I'm gonna get this thing. I'm gonna open the end. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, this is a really cool topic that I'm really excited about. I think it goes really under the hood of some of the like weird, hard, annoying problems with using LLMs and especially like creating really good UXs when LLMs are streaming like partial JSON objects and how you can show incremental progress updates in your UI and in your app or on your CLI while without having to wait for the entire JSON object to be streamed out.
Exactly. But when we go into this, typically you start with whiteboards, but today I want to do something different and I want to start with examples. I want to go straight to our example and just show a couple of examples along the way. And before we do any of this stuff, let's just go look at ChatGPT. When any of us ever use ChatGPT and I ask it to go do something, and I'm using the thinking model right now, it's like explain why traits are not good for LLMs, for LM generated code. And I'll add some more. And I go do this. This whole experience that's designed by ChatGPT is actually goes through and tells you, oh, you're thinking. You can look at the thinking code. You can see what it's going to be thinking along the way. If you want, you can opt in and skip thinking and go straight to content generation. This is all content that actually, and right over here, it made a section for what it is. It's actually, I can click on and see exactly what it's thinking for different steps of the way. Why it does this is because the generation of code is all based on the same thing that we have when we first build websites, which is response time. Anytime I've never met someone, I've never met a single major website provider that says, hey, Google loaded fast enough. If you go to google.com and you search something and you say like dogs, they talk about their search time. I guess not anymore. But like, there's never been a single time where they've stopped optimizing load times on Google. There's never been a single website that does that. Similarly for your LM generation code, there's no point at which, no matter how fast the models are, that it will be fast enough. Because the fastest thing you could have done is as soon as before the user even typed out the question, know what question they were going to ask, have the answer already ready, and load it up into their machine. The next best thing you can do is take their answer, take the question that as soon as they type it, have the answer already ready on their exact machine, in the exact app, in memory, load it up and answer it back. At some point, you're going to go down and make a network call, and that will always be slow, even if the LLMs are instantaneous. And the thing is that today's models are all based on token generation models. So the mechanisms that you use to go and display these responses makes a huge difference. If I couldn't see what these thought processes were along the way, it makes it
You
a
just
lot.
get pissed off and you
Yeah,
drop. You'd be like, I don't have time for this. I just see a spinner, right? And so, okay, so you're talking about like basically this, the more you can show something happen, the earlier you can show something happening, even if it isn't the final answer, the more likely people will actually sit there and wait for it to finish.
and going back to the theme of our previous last conversation and the conversation before that, this UX is important for steerability. You're not only helping the person be entertained along the way, you're helping them have confidence that this thing that is going to take a couple seconds to run is actually going to give them something that is worthwhile and worth sticking around for. It's like the little dopamine
Okay,
hit you're giving.
so if I see the thoughts are wrong, I might just like exit. I mean, I do this with Claude Code all the time. You exit out and you'd be like, nope, nope, that's wrong. Like, let me go and start over without having to wait for it to do the whole thing.
Exactly. That's one of the things I find very frustrating about sometimes using Cursor, for example, because it doesn't give me a good incremental UX. So then I'm kind of stuck trying to digest all the information and re-steer it correctly. But one of the cool things Cursor has done is they let you go back and click on a point and checkpoint your code and go back to that point in the code base. It's very, very similar for anything else. So let's take something really, really simple like resume parsing, for example. If I were to do any sort of resume parsing, and typically you ask an LM to extract information. We all know that an LM can extract information in Markdown, and we can render the Markdown in a useful way. That is totally valid. But this Markdown, even if I go render in a really pretty Markdown format and I syntax and like bold it, etc., is just going to be a lot less attractive than something that's actually, like, for example, these are real hyperlinks I can click on. This hyperlink is broken. I can even give you a little notification that it's an invalid URL. The skills can be listed as tags. Experiences can be listed in a more drop-down form, in a more visually appealing format. There's a reason most websites aren't plain text or plain HTML. They have like CSS on it because style does matter. But if I were to go and stream this, I have a couple options. This is easy to stream. I just render it as it comes out, and the Markdown naturally streams token-wise. This gets a lot more complicated. So we're going to talk about how it actually looks to go and build more stable streaming systems along the way over here. And this is a very
Okay, so you're converting to some sort of structured output under the hood, and then you have a renderer like React components or something to take that like JSON object and turn it into this like beautiful view.
exactly. And if we go take
Okay.
something a little bit more complicated, like a recipe generator, when you go do something like this, ChatGPT is definitely just rendering tokens. But what this allows me to build is very interactive components where even while it's streaming, I can actually interact with it.
Okay, so pause this. So you're running the slider is basically how many servings do I want? And you're
Yep.
basically at any given point, you're able to combine logic that's interactive in the UI with whatever incremental output has to date been streamed by the LLM, and it updates in real
Exactly.
time. Okay.
Exactly. So if I and this is the beauty of doing things like this is the code is actually not complex. So everyone, I think, should be able to build applications like this along the way. But I'm just going to do a really quick thing to talk about what this is and what the data separation path is. So if we're down here and we have like our UI, which is a React component, we'll use a recipe as an example. I don't know how to spell, but we'll assume that spelling is not a thing that I have to care about anymore thanks to LLMs. We have a recipe example. And what does a recipe take in? Well, this renderer takes in a type of a recipe. This takes in a recipe data model. And a recipe data model is just a class, or I guess interface in JavaScript and TypeScript, that has a name, string, number of servings, int, and on top of that, it's going to have a couple more things, which are ingredients, which is going to be a string array, and it's going to have a instructions string array as well. Well, all of us know how to render this type. I don't have to write the React code for this. Any ChatGPT model can do this. So all I need to be able to do is provide some sort of backend service that can somehow produce this recipe type. And if I am able to do that, then this UI should just work. And any interactivity I build on this, for example, a recipe slider that multiplies, oops, ingredients is wrong. We'll need something else. In order to make this interactive based on number of servings, I actually need to change my data model a little bit. And I need to write it
Hmm.
where ingredients needs to be a list of items. But if I did this, it should be possible for me to make an interactive recipe view in a straightforward manner. The
Right. This is
problem
really clear how I would turn this into React components and render the different things and however I wanted, and I could have the slider logic and stuff.
exactly. The problem, however, that I'll run into is right now, as of right now, if I had an LLM generate a recipe type, I won't actually be able to send it to the model until it's done. So that's kind of the problem that I want to talk about today. How do you get around this? And how do you make it so that this interactive component doesn't turn into a nightmare of code?
Can I
How do you
change
do?
this to interface real quick? That's going to bother me.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. That's a good point. And we really, really want to go nail this problem. The thing is, this problem is actually really quite easy. It's not that hard. And I think we'll be able to do this in real time when I screen share over here. Let me pull this up over here. Give me 1 second. Okay, and then let me screen share my actual VS Code to show how we'll turn this thing into code. Share VS Code. Actually, I'll just share my whole desktop. And again, as per usual, if you see anything you're not supposed to see, please let us know. We'll clip it from the video and we'll keep going. So right over here, I have a very, very basic Next.js app that I just made. You can see if I have the commands that I ran. I basically just ran pnpm create next app and added BAML into it. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just start off first with just a example of the exact thing that we did, which is recipes. Hold on, I can't type. My computer doesn't let me type. Okay, that works. Recipe dot. I'm going to zoom in and write this over here. We're going to start off with a function that is generate. Oh, there you go. Okay, cool. Name, string, ingredients, servings, int, and then class ingredient. Okay, cool. It kind of figured it out over here anyway. I didn't have to write any code, which is kind of nice. Cool. And let's just play around with this prompt really fast and see what we do. Let me know if this font size is acceptable for everyone else. So right over here, we're going to make a recipe, and this will be like, let's say like, I love sag paneer. That's what I had for dinner last night. So let's use that. I want a recipe for sag paneer.
All right.
When I go run this, someone's talking. Can you mute them, Dex? Okay.
Yeah, I got
I
it.
go run
Sorry.
this. The first thing that's going to happen is the model's going to start generating stuff. And I'm going to try and show some subtle stuff along the way. So you can see how it's streaming and how it's actually rendering stuff. I don't know if you guys caught that. I'll rerun it really fast. So you can see how it's
Yeah,
streaming
okay. So
along.
on the left you have broken JSON, and on the right you're kind of just like always producing a valid object, right?
Exactly. So this is pretty much a guarantee that BAML does for you. So now you don't have to worry about this. But there's something that kind of bothers me over here, which is ingredients don't really mean anything until the full ingredient has come out of it. I don't really want ingredient to be used. I don't really care if the name is paneer, but the quantity is not yet defined because the model's only printed out these tokens. How could I do that? Well, one thing you can do is we can just tell the model that, hey, this thing only should come out when it's actually done. So every ingredient will only stream as it's done. So I'll show you what that means. Now you'll notice the streaming mechanism only prints out the whole object instead of partially, regardless of what the model is doing along the way. So what this does is it actually gives you good guarantees on the types of the object over there. On the other hand, instructions, I'm actually very happy to have these stream out along the way because they're long forms of text. So it's not that useful for me to have it. That said, the serving size is almost an essential necessary thing that I need. So why don't we also tell the model that, hey, this thing cannot be null when it's processing. It needs to be at least somewhat present. So now when I actually run this, even if the model has dumped out some tokens, until the serving size has appeared, nothing will be rendered at all to the model. So it allows me to go and control this purely by giving some minor annotations into the code. What these small things I did make a huge impact in exactly how the stuff
Oh.
is actually going to be rendered in the UX that happens.
So you don't push an ingredient into the final object until the whole ingredient object has been streamed.
Exactly.
Okay. This is
And
sick. I haven't gone super deep on this part of BAML or doing this like otherwise. I know like AI SDK has some stuff that kind of does this, but this is really cool to see.
I'll show you the exact manifestation. This is really subtle, so see if you can catch it of what this actually does. Let's see if the images load. Once I do, give it a second. There you go. Okay. See if you guys can see what's happening over here. Anyone have a guess? I'm just streaming numbers in a plot line. I'm plotting how many tablespoons of water are there on Earth, and I'm accumulating numbers. And here I asked it to list out a bunch of XYZ coordinates.
All right, where's our super cracked chat? Tell us what's going on here.
So
Yeah.
exactly, it defaults to 0. That's part one. The other thing it's doing is while the numbers are actually generated, LLM spit out numbers from left to right, which is reasonable. That's how I write them as well. So it actually renders a 5, then a 53, then a 530, and a 53,000. It actually makes for a very, very, very jarring UX on there. But what if you said that, hey, numbers can't actually stream until they're fully done by default? Well, once you do that, you now get a view like this. It's a little bit slower, but every single point is rendered at the exact same point that it needs to be on the XYZ axis without you having to think about it. And what this means is there's no point at which rendering this graph that it's invalid or incorrect. There's no such thing as an invalid state. It's incomplete, but there's no invalid states like this where it's like slowly hopping up to the right digit. And more tangibly, what this leads to is if I was rendering this graph, which is just book popularity over time, you can see how this would be much, much harder to deal with without you having to think, if you had to think about this along the way. This axis would just not work because you'd render at 1, so your graph y-axis would snap all the way to the left and then go all the way down along the way.
Question in the chat, how do you determine when a number is complete?
A lot of algorithms that we've built out there. You can go read the BAML source code, but the idea is that if we know what fields are in a data type or something else, we can basically run a bunch of heuristics to know if a number is complete along the way or not. For
Is
example, if
it
it's
the
an
simple
integer,
the simple version? Yeah, go ahead.
let's take an example of like an integer, for example. If I'll draw on my screen. If an example is like, if you know that the type is an integer and the model spit out 1, 2, 3, you don't actually know if it's complete yet. But if the model put a comma there, you also don't know if it's complete. If a model put a period there, you also don't know if it's complete because you could be in Europe. You could be in Europe instead of in America because periods don't mean something else. But on the other hand, if the model put a question mark there, you know it's complete. So you can kind of have intuition about how numbers are going to be dealt with in different contexts based on what you know. And we just have done a lot of this work under the hood for you. Uh, kind
Right, like
of.
I would be looking for a comma, right? It was like if I integer specifically, integer in JSON, I feel like is an easy one. You're like, okay, when is the field? Like JSON has a field terminator, which is a comma in most cases,
Yep,
or a like closed bracket for the object.
exactly. So let me go into exactly. So that's kind of how we can build intuition hunches around this. Let me clear my annotation.
S- So we
Can you
need
clear?
regex or grammar for every data type, basically. Yeah, I'll clear it.
Yeah, that's kind of what the BAML parser does under the hood. But what this lets you do is, I want you guys to take a look at this UI really fast and see if you can catch the difference. And it's named incorrectly, object and array, but there's a very subtle difference here.
I like the second one better. I like the array one better.
What do you like about it better?
I don't know. It just feels more polished. I mean, the other one is like more interactive. It has more like the where the tokens stream one by one. It feels more, but like just feels super polished.
I think it's just,
And
I
it's
think what I would
go ahead.
describe it as is Andre Karpathy talks about this autonomy slider all the time. But here we kind of have like this UX slider of how much streaming do you want to do. The object one is basically full streaming. Stream every token as soon as it comes there and like show the user everything. The array one is somewhere down here, which says, hey, I'm only going to show you cards as they finish and nothing else. And a totally different approach would be, hey, I'll show you nothing until it's completely done, and then I'll show you the whole thing all at once. It's not to say any one of these are better or worse, but definitely your users will have a preference for different ones of them. And what you'll want to do is you'll want the ability to control that very trivially, so you can actually go ahead and decide what you do.
I would
Yeah, so
almost want like I feel like something in the middle would be really good. Like not don't stream every single token, but like show the header and then once all the text is there, show all the text in one go. Like the streaming every token just feels like ChatGPT and it feels like every AI app I've ever seen. The
yeah,
second one feels like it is real time and I can tell it's AI. Maybe if there's like a spinner here after each one of these. But like yeah, I think there's like yeah, having I think your point about like having control and granularity on every field is the right one to be focusing on.
exactly. And I think the point here is like the thing that differentiates most AI applications today is purely the UX. And this is a big part of the UX of how you're actually streaming stuff around. So why don't we take this example that we're building out here, the recipe example, to fruition, and just complete it. Complete it. Let's do this. So what we have here is we have a function called generate recipe. It's going to take in a recipe, produce a recipe data model. We put some streaming traits around it, so we actually get to know that, hey, servings, it won't pop up until servings are complete. Let's also guarantee that name will also exist at all points. Like this data model is kind of useless until the name and the servings are done. Ingredients, they don't have to be done. They don't have to like, I'm okay if the ingredients aren't yet started, but I definitely want to make sure that ingredients only pop in as an ingredient is fully complete. And lastly, I want to make sure that instructions only pop in. I can stream as much as they want. I don't really care. So let's build a UI for this really quickly. Layout.tsx, page.tsx. So I'll just do this in the main React app because why not? So the first thing I'll do is import.
Okay, so this is I guess is using the built-in BAML generator for creating like React hooks that you can use to stream this stuff down.
Exactly. So it will just
Cool.
we'll do purely on the React side, but we don't have to think about anything. From Do I have it here? SRC. Oh. YAML client / React / hooks. Use generate recipe.
Nice.
And what I have here is I've used generate recipe. This thing is going to spit out data to me. It's either going to be a recipe type or undefined. And I think it streams by default. So, and the type of data is going to be, as you can see, name is guaranteed. Where is this? Oh, sorry. If data dot name is guaranteed to be there as it's filled in. Name dot ingredients dot map I, and all of these are guaranteed to be completed along the way. So I actually don't have to worry about streaming over here because this thing will just do the streaming work for me. And it basically guarantees that my type system matches the type I have over here. In theory, if I remove this and I only use ingredients, then unit should become, oh, data is, sorry. When I'm writing ingredients, unit becomes, where is this? Let me just make sure the types are
Okay,
correct.
so the point here while you're fixing that, I guess the point here is that you don't have to put like question mark everywhere to do these like optional checks on everything because you're like, okay, once an item is in that array, I can guarantee from the parser that that field will be non-null rather than having to be like, okay, if this is true, then show it, otherwise don't show it, and have all these like conditional checks down like streaming into my render function or leaking down into my render function basically. I
Yeah,
can put
exactly.
all
No,
that
and then
logic declaratively in my class definitions.
async 408. Is that right? Sorry, I write a lot more Python code than TypeScript code.
Skill issue.
Yeah, probably. Um, ingredient. Yeah. When I go do this, unit becomes like optional when I'm actually returning this type along the way. So let me catch up to what we're doing again. So what we're doing here is we're calling the generate recipe method we have in a streaming mechanism. For every single instance that we get of the stream, we loop through every ingredient and we see unit. Unit is a string or undefined. But if we go back here and we actually say that ingredient can only pop in when it's done, then in theory, unit should actually no longer be undefined. It should only be defined at compile time. And that is exactly, I think, what happens. Yeah, there we go. That's exactly what happens. So unit now becomes known at compile time. So now when I do rendering, I know how to render ingredients, and I just render an ingredient with this thing. So when I actually render the new quantity, I can do unit dot quantity times chunk dot serving. And this is guaranteed to be a number. There's no streaming constraints, so I get a lot of simplicity. Otherwise, what I would have to do if I didn't have all these things on here.
Okay, and is the chunk going to be the incrementally updated object, right? It's not just the like diff of the tokens that were sent. It's literally every chunk that comes off of that iterator in TypeScript is going to be the full object.
Exactly. Otherwise, now to
Okay.
build a reactive component, I have to write some code like this. And if every single time I want to build some sort of interactivity, I have to write code like this, I basically won't do it because I've made life a lot harder for myself. So what I find is adding a few type constraints on here can go a long way in terms of making life easier for developers to actually go ahead and build the system that they want under the hood, because now this thing reflects the type system correctly. And I'm reflecting my UX in the type system. So now rendering a UI object off of this ingredient type is just infinitely easier, because
Yeah.
what I can do now is I can say, oops.
Yeah, I would love to see this like mixed in with a non-AI generated variable like your slider or something.
Well, exactly. So now you just do like, you say something like this. So let me show you that code. So I'm going to go write this over here. Ah, there we go. Okay. So when I go write this, I'm going to say like, so cost state servings. So we'll do this. Uh,
Oh, I see. Okay. So you have a state thing here. Cool.
I have a state right over here. And what I will do here is I'll say like, now I have to actually make another object.
And then are you going to iterate over this?
And because I'm doing the partial version of it, I'm going to render a recipe from the partial versions of it. What is this? I don't know. Expose this. Okay, well, I will.
Sorry, I finish the original demo and then we can come
Okay.
here and make it
Well,
toggleable.
I can write the UI type out really fast. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So what I'll do over here is now I'll do this, and I'll do use effect. As long as I have stream data, what I'll do is I will take the serving scale and I'll say set recipe
Yep.
name. So right over here, I'm going to
Nice.
go multiply this together. And as soon as I have
Okay,
stream
so
data,
you're just basically
oh, sorry.
overriding the recipe and then mapping it in to update the quantity.
I'm actually silly. I haven't written front end code in a very long time. I'll do this. I'll import this. As soon as I get stream data, I do this. And now what I will do is I don't actually know how to build a renderer in React.
I'm sure Claude can help you out with this.
There we go. I'm just gonna go fill this in. It's gonna fill it in for me. I'll say like if not recipe. Cool. And I'm gonna go fill this out. And what I'll say is ingredients will convert over here. E, add a little bit of space. Oops. Map. There you go. And now I've built myself a nice little unified symbol right over here.
Oh man, we got some React experts in the crowd telling you that your
Yeah, so
use
I
effect is
apologize for
wrong,
not being a
but
React expert. But what you end
we
up
will
doing,
push this code. You should put a PR in and update it to be more correct.
what you do over here is you just take the quantity and just multiply by the serving scale, and then you can turn this into a slider in React along the way and go do this. So if I actually were to show you the real code, I actually wrote this code with actual React, and you can go the exactly what you do, where we actually have we do the exact same thing that I was showing earlier, which is we have servings that we set over here, then we have servings ratio, and then we basically use a slider to go and change the ratio along the way, and that sets the number of servings. So the initial state is always set by the recipe providing me a number of servings. And then we just use the serving state to tell me what I'm doing. And what this lets me do is when I go do this, I just take where is this? Sorry, let me find this. Every single time I list out an ingredient recipe, I just list it out with the ratio of the serving ratio, and that solves the problem for me. If I go down to here and I show you what this code looks like, oops, over here, this thing, ingredient render, we made too many abstractions when we did this.
Yeah, actually, like you probably don't even need the use effect if you're just computing it live in the thing, but
Yeah, probably not. Well, we use a slider to go do it. So maybe we do. I have no idea. I'm not a React
yeah,
expert. I do mostly Rust code, sadly. But what we're able to is we just take the amount and we just format it according to this. And
sadly.
the reason that we do format amount is because it turned out that when you actually multiply numbers together, you actually don't get nice fractions. And what I wanted to do over here in this UI, if you take a look at this, is notice what I actually do is I actually have halves with proper UTF-8 half tokens and 1/4 tokens, and etc. So I actually wanted the fractions
Fancy.
to look good. So we did a little bit more effort to take the fraction you have and actually render it in a really, really nice way. But again, these sort of things aren't possible. And there's nothing I can do in the LLM prompting to actually make it render this out in the right way. It's just not possible.
Also, if you have a scale that can measure 4 3/8 grams of something, there's might be other problems going on.
Oh, my skill can do that. You just need to cook more. But I think a large part about what the conversation today is about is really around designing these UXs and different challenges that you can have. So one of the most basic things we showed you is you can go and control exactly how you're streaming along the way. But I think another thing that's worth talking about is actually what is the implication of this? Assuming you can go build this, what are interesting UI things you can do to actually make life better for your users? Because building is one part, but another thing you can do in this approach is now, let's say I'm building an invoice generator. So we've all seen a lot of invoice generators. If I'm actually streaming out objects and I have certain things be editable, what I could actually do in this UI, imagine this is an invoice thing but in the same case for recipes, I could actually put an edit icon right next to chicken breast and say, I'm going to edit chicken breast and replace what 500G is because I know the real answer. It should actually be 750 grams for 4 servings. Or the unit should actually be 1 breast or 2 breasts instead of 500 grams of chicken breast. So I can actually make UI components that are editor only, edit the state of this. And even though the LM is constantly going to be spitting out chicken breast, 500 grams, I have edited it to be 1 breast or, thank you. Yeah, I've
Yep.
edited it to be a single amount. So if you're building any sort of application, you can actually build a user interactivity flow much, much, much sooner than you think. So if you're doing, I know folks that are running that are generating on the order of 5 to 8,000 tokens out of LLMs. If your user can only interact with your component at the end of 5,000 or 8,000 tokens, you basically built an async workflow. Your user's basically going to tab and come back to it later, which is a totally different mindset to go in. If it's in my code, a lot of your
Yeah.
engineers, you've probably seen this one. My
Yeah.
code is compiling.
My
Now
tokens are streaming.
my LM is generating. My tokens
Yeah.
are streaming. It's the same thing. The gap is long enough, your users will leave and go do. My AI is thinking exactly. your users will leave and go do something else. And it doesn't matter if you made it a little bit faster, because fundamentally what's going to happen is your user is distracted. So if you can keep your user more engaged, you can actually lead to a higher outcome workflow much, much, much faster. And for anyone that's building agent code, you're basically doing structured outputs all the time. You're basically just streaming structured outputs. That's what tool calls are.
Because yeah, you're showing the tools, you're showing the thinking, you're showing the like, okay, here's what's happening. No, I love this. This is sick. I've been meaning to play with this for a while and I haven't had a chance to. Are you guys still talking about that? You showed me like a to-do app a while ago, which was like
Oh,
even more interactive, right? Is
yeah,
that
I think
still live? Is that still kicking?
I think
And then we
so.
should probably transition to questions and stuff.
Yes. So let's see if I can get this to-do app kicking. Um, so like this is one example of what you can do with a to-do app. And again, these structured outputs. Let me refresh this. Sadly, this is not maintained by my team. It's maintained by me, and I'm not a very good React dev, and probably we should put someone on this in a better way. So I'm gonna go run this really fast. It's like I want steps. I want 5 things to get better at chess. And so when you do some sort of streaming here, you can see that this thing is actually uh, uh, create 5 steps. No, create 5 steps. Remove that task and then create 5 steps. No, this did not work. LMs are dumb. Let me reset this.
I thought that you just put in your to-do items and then you like tell it what's been done. I see.
Maybe let's do, we swapped this to use a very dumb model, and I was curious how that would behave. There you go.
Okay.
So what is it? What, and you guys saw something kind of interesting here, which is this thing actually streams everything. This thing only streams as it comes out. I'm a pro chess player. I'm a pro. I do chess. I think this will work. And what's interesting here is it actually adds another tag to it dynamically along the way. But now as a user, I can say like I actually just did this myself. Or I can uncheck this. So I've built interactivity into an application that is almost typically only LLM powered. If I go through and said like I reviewed games yesterday, and all of this is actually just streaming results. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like it's an agent, but I'm actually streaming everything, the entire background. And that's what makes it, I think, feel a lot more natural. It is very, very similar to the example that I was showing over here, which is the difference between this versus this. I have chosen to be on the left-hand side of the streaming here, where I don't want to stream everything. I only want to stream a couple of things.
This is dope.
Is- But I'll open up to questions today. Dex, firstly, what are your thoughts on this kind of stuff? How do you envision people using these kinds of tools?
I mean, I'm obsessed with coding agents, so I'm just kind of sitting around thinking about like almost none of them support streaming. Codex kind of does, but it's a mess, and like I would love it. I think OpenCode has some good streaming stuff in it, but it's like there's so much you can do to make the UI more interesting when you give kind of the model a stateful object to interact with and either like patch and send updates to, or it almost feels like I don't know. I'm getting like flashbacks to 10 years ago when I was like learning about the React virtual DOM, and you basically just have like a system interacting with like a set of state. And it feels much more like if you're building browser, like the browser was designed to handle this kind of stuff. And I feel like we're in like the Stone Age in terms of hooking LLMs up to be able to interact with visual state in that world.
What's really interesting, actually, on that idea is I know a couple of people that do this, which is ingredients are really just an array of items. But there are a lot of scenarios where you ask an LLM to talk about generate an array of items. But if you know that the items are only coming in as they complete, you can actually kick off future workflows on top of those items. So if you're going to run like if you're going to run like a item or like
Oh, like
ingredient,
emit the item and then go do a deep research to like hydrate it with like links that I can click on to learn more or something.
like if you were going to go write this kind of task, it's like use LLM for research on I. Typically, this thing would be a thing that you would have to like think about your latency workflow here. You'd have to generate every item and then go do this. But now you can actually go build this out really, really easily simply by running an iteration loop on every single item that comes through. So like the speed boost that you get is just insanely high along the way. And I think coding agents especially can make a lot of benefit from this. Kusti asked a really interesting
Yeah.
question. You talk about bidirectional communication, managing state between the front end and the back end. Thoughts about a couple of different things. Bidirectional state is the thing we talked about a lot last episode as well, and the voice agents and in the interruptibility thing. So I'll pull that up really fast. Also, Dex, is your website up? We should give you an exact one-to-one copy of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Because
Um,
I actually load up everything down here, and I think we have whiteboards where we talked about how bidirectional agents work. It's actually a pretty complicated system to go build out because the fundamental problem is bidirectional stuff, especially when you're streaming, is choosing exactly when you interrupt the thing that's streaming to inject the new information. If that's of interest, at this concept, episode 19, interruptible agents probably talks about that in a lot more detail. Albeit it's a very specific use case of um, how you do it in terms of interruptions. But it's the exact same things in terms of bidirectional. You're basically interrupting the stream to go re-steer it in some other way.
I have
I'll
one question for you before we get into the rest of the questions. Did you just ask me if my website was up?
for the code thing. It's
Oh, you
so
mean
fucking
the new
cool.
website?
Yes, the new one. It's so freaking
It's
cool. I want
coming.
more
It's
to see
coming. We're
it.
gonna ship it Friday. Keep
Okay,
an eye
cool.
on the Hacker News on Monday. There will be fun things, fun announcements coming.
Okay, you should
Um,
copy and paste the podcast page and put it on, so then you have
yeah,
access to it. It's all this website's
yeah,
open source.
amazing.
Yes, it was not meant to be a shots fired at is your website. I'm just excited to talk about it more. So I was like, I'll link you to it.
Okay, Ice
Hopefully
Dev
that
2 Dev
did that
said
answer your
I'm in a
question,
new.
Kosti? Sorry,
Oh,
let me
sorry.
just make sure we answered Kosti's question as well.
You didn't comment on AGUI, which I'm curious
Oh,
for your thoughts.
let me go pull it up really fast. I don't think I've seen AGUI. I'll pull it up so everyone can see what it is.
This is the
Um,
like Copilot Kit project.
which is
right.
awesome.
Okay, let's look at it. It's a standard protocol to help you go manage information through your application. I haven't used it, so I don't have a strong opinion right now. I don't really know how they do it. I think the hardest parts about these systems isn't the hardest way to sync these systems isn't actually about sending data. It isn't actually about like the UI and everything else. Building UI, there's lots of frameworks that go do that. This might be one of them. The hardest things about it is actually like the mechanics of how you write it. So for example, the fact that I could actually like not null this and only use like the done version of the ingredient type, and I get the type safety instead of having to write something like instead of
Right, you
having
have
to
like
write something
six different renderers in these all these different conditional blocks of like, okay, if we have this, show this, if we have this, show this, otherwise show nothing, and all that stuff.
exactly. It's all about like the question. Like if I have to write, like for example, if I have to write something like stream data on ingredients on map, and if the way I have to write this is I can't actually write this, I have to write something like this, then I've kind of lost the benefit of any framework. There's no framework that I can really use where if I have to go, it's just the ergonomics of writing this code is very challenging.
It's
And I
declarative. You're doing declarative versus imperative, and we all know. I don't know if there's any Lisp heads in here, but we all love declarative code over here.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't know if the framework actually supports like types and propagating types correctly, but if it does, it would be that's really the most important part about doing this stuff, in my opinion.
Um, I think we covered decision workflows that can update based on inputs to previous steps. I think the To-Do app covers that well. Could this be the AI equivalent of progressive disclosure UI pattern? Meaning, could streaming be used to reduce cognitive load while showing the essentials to start and letting the user choose what they want to see?
Yeah, I don't know who said that, but that is probably that's a great way to put it of what I think the power of streaming is for AI applications.
And then there's someone talking about letting the AI design the UI itself instead of just managing the data. I think my take on that is probably like I wouldn't put that in a production app that I wanted to sell to people, but I bet you could do it for certain use cases and it would look really dope.
Well, actually, Dex, I have a way to do this that I think would be really freaking cool. So
Okay.
I know the shape of my data over here, right? As long as I know
Yeah.
the type of my data, what I could do is I could say, hey model, I have a type that is described with this interface. Can you give me a React component that takes in the interface and renders it?
There's some
And if I
people doing that. Like
Mhm.
there's some, I think like the Tambo guys are working on that.
Yeah, and I actually think it's a great idea long term because what's interesting now is I can actually have one model generate the data and a second model render it. And the rendering is a one-time task. As soon as I know what the shape of my data model is, I can actually like pull it out and I just render that React component dynamically every single time.
This is
Um,
like the dynamic extraction example almost, where you're like, okay, here's the document, generate a schema, and then do the extraction, right?
exactly. So I'll run this again. So like what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this invoice, I'm going to go run it out. And what I'm doing here is I'm first having the model spit out what it thinks the schema of this data type is. And it does that and it builds out the schema. And I run a secondary task to actually extract data from the schema. Now,
And so you use
I
the schema to render this UI, and then you just
exactly.
render, yeah.
The third task I could have done is say, hey, I have this schema I'm going to produce. Give me a React component that takes the schema and renders it. And if I did that, 100%, I can make this a lot prettier. In fact, I should probably do that. I think this example would be so much more fun if I built that in. You could see something even
Yeah,
cooler.
you should have a third button here that is like dynamic render, and it's like different every time.
Exactly. Yeah. Because like the AI is generating the React component that renders that type, but it's different but stable. And that's an important distinction to make along the way.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, whoever asked that question, like 100%, you can do this, and I think you can do it in a way that's actually good, as long as this place that you start with is actually a type system and not really arbitrary code. Whether the type system is described in JSON schema, whether it's described in Zod, whether it's described in BAML, doesn't really matter. But the premise of what you do with it is that you use the type system to power what the AI does, rather than just do it with vibes.
Sick.
Good.
There's a lot of chatter, but I don't see any more questions. Anybody got any last minute things? Otherwise, Bob, let us know what the big takeaway here is.
I'll wait one more second and see if there's any more questions. But otherwise, like really the big takeaway is like when you're designing your AI applications, spend a couple more minutes thinking about what the UX is. And then like if it's easy enough, if it's literally as easy as writing one line of code to make your object stream like and feel more ergonomic, just go do it. It's not hard. It's really, really easy to make your applications feel natural. Could this be used to optimize token usage? Streaming really doesn't optimize token usage in any way. So I don't think that would be orthogonal things that you could do to make it
If
to make
any,
it better.
if anything, streaming lets you use more tokens without having the user have to wait. Like you can like stream out the thing and then be like, okay, now we're doing the research, and you're burning lots of tokens to improve the quality iteratively over time while not having the user have to wait 20 minutes for deep research.
This Rolando said something really interesting over here. You can guardrail the design with a design system instead of generating schema, and I would generate a layout kind of like this. So
So you
at
already
the
have the components, but it's taking from your design library to actually render the stuff. I like that.
exactly.
That's sick. Awesome.
Exactly. So then you could have a form that literally matches the theme of your website. And if you're using something like Shadcn, that's kind of what you're doing manually as a developer. But now you just tell the AI to only use these specific components, and boom, it fits in right away. So it's even more. it's even more like tied together. And I think like personally for me, this is what I'm most excited about AI. And I think we're not really there yet as generally engineering teams because the complexity of doing this stuff is like I said, if every single time I want to stream something and make it slightly better, I have to do like 5 extra tokens, or my app is gonna yell at me because TypeScript says no. I'm just not gonna do this thing, especially if streaming partial JSON is hard. But if it's really easy and I can add one line of code to do the thing to make it do the behavior I want, I'll do it more correctly. It's the exact same thing of like why use state and React makes it way easier to build reactive apps because I don't have to think about like I just change the state and somehow React will re-render the home component and do the right thing. My brain cycles don't go on it. And I think that's the same thing over here as a developer. You probably don't want to spend brain cycles thinking about how to do partial streaming or any of this stuff. You just kind of want it to work.
Hell yeah.
Um,
There's so much cool stuff to build.
yeah, I think so too. We have a couple more things that we've been thinking about how streaming works for like long agentic systems. So maybe we'll do a future episode on that. But that is
Mm.
also a whole different ballgame of how you go do that. Um, Tambo UI is pretty cool if you haven't checked it out. They do some interesting stuff with generating UI components on the fly.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, Sick, y'all. This was dope. Thank you, Vibov. I have been looking forward to this episode for a while.
where do you actually persist results? So just for more context on how this thing works, this use generated recipe actually comes from the BAML code you write. But under the hood, what we do is we actually code gen BAML code. We actually code gen React code, and we code gen React server action code that actually does that actually makes the calls for you and then does all the work behind the scenes to propagate data straight to the front end. So there's a server action file and a hook that gets code gen. So then when you use this, it's actually the data is living in the hook itself. If you go read this code somewhere down
Okay,
here.
so if I wanted to, I mean, that server action was pretty small. Like if I wanted to, I could stream it and like shim part of it out to a database and stream the rest of it down to a UI if I wanted to, right?
Exactly.
Do the like optimistic updates basically.
Um, are there any security implications to be aware of with streaming? No, I don't think so. I mean, sometimes you might like, for example, you might want to be really. I can think of a couple actually that will happen in like eventual apps. Like for example, sometimes I want to hide some secret words and I don't want to show them off to users. And I think the easiest example of this is like when an LM is streaming Markdown, sometimes you'll see it go from like title here, and before it actually makes the title bold, it just spits out like asterisk asterisk title, and then eventually it snaps to bold, and I'm doing this. And I kind of, as a user, I kind of wish I never rendered the asterisk asterisk at all. I just waited until the title word popped in. And you could do the same thing with like rendering some sort of sensitive data where like, for example, a password field should not render the raw password until the password field is complete. And it should render as dots and the user should opt into seeing it like nvars or something else. You probably would have to do a little bit more engineering work to go solve that problem on your own in some use case. Like if you have a raw text field and you want to just hide parts of it, that's just not a thing you can do. But it's not really a major security flaw because the data is available anyway. It's in the raw text. If you wanted to cancel the data generation, like for example, ChatGPT does this, where like if you start talking about things it's not supposed to talk about and starts answering, in the middle
It
of the
like
answer,
dies midstream, right? It's just like, oh,
exactly.
nope.
Exactly. So the way you solve that problem, if you go back and look at our interruptions video, episode 19, I think, is you have to go interrupt the stream. You have to be monitoring the stream and checking for something in an invalid way and then go cancel it. But that's the only real way to go do this. There's no inherent security problems in streaming itself. Does this work with TanStack? Yeah, it should work with TanStack as well, but you don't really need to use TanStack for at least these calls because these calls are just calling the LM directly in the server action itself. So you don't have to make a use query mechanism out of it along the way. It's kind of a self-contained hook for every function that you define.
Sick.
Cool.
I think that
I
puts
think
us at
that's it.
time.
I am extremely jet lagged, so today we're gonna go and reset this, and I'm gonna go get some rest. But it was tons of fun. Thank you everyone for joining. Dexter, as
Announcement.
always, super fun.
Real
Oh,
quick
you
announcement.
Yeah, go for it.
We are changing the platform up next week. We're going to try to move this to StreamYard. So they do have live streaming. There will be a better chat experience. The recordings will be much higher quality. So thank you all for the first, I think it was episode 20, episode 21. Everyone here for supporting and being a part of this community and bringing us your energy and your great questions. We're going to double down on the show and maybe give you all a little bit better production quality going forward. So super stoked about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, we are too. And also, like, firstly, thank you, everyone. We just hit, I was gonna make, I totally forgot at the beginning. It's like we just crossed 1.5K subs, and that is awesome to see everyone supporting us and actually watching these videos that start off with just me and Dexter talking at each other for an hour about weird AI topics.
A lot of
Um,
shouting. It wasn't just talking.
we're both very passionate humans, as most people can probably tell at this point.
We're
If
still
any of
learning
you
to share
have,
the toys.
and please keep sending topic ideas if you ever want on our on the GitHub for AI that works. If you ever have topic ideas that you think would be awesome to see, like post them on there. If some code feels unflushed out, comment. We'll do our best to make sure that it's actually helpful and guiding people in the way that they want. But this was great, Dexter, as always.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Catch y'all next week.